Welcome everyone to our Forever Buffs Faculty Spotlight Q&A round 2, featuring CU Boulder Triple PhD and lecturer Hannah Glick. Before we open up our Q&A with Hannah, we're going to share her short buff talk from our CU Boulder Next event in New York last February. In this short video, Hannah, you'll hear about how her relationships at CU Boulder as a grad student got her to where she is today. It's about 8 minutes, so pretty quick. And just a reminder, following the video, I'm going to introduce Dean Scott Adler of the Graduate School at CU Boulder, who will be facilitating our Q&A with Hannah today. For our viewers, as you're watching the video, you can pose questions to Hannah using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we will do our best to get through as many of your questions as we can today. And with that, let's go ahead and share Hannah's buff talk.
Tonight, I want to talk about how amazing mentors changed my life. But first, I want to start at the end. I want to show you guys how great mentorship and 7 years of hard work resulted in a pretty amazing thing happening, the 3-minute thesis experience and winning the 3-minute thesis at CU Boulder. So, are you guys ready? I'm going to condense 7 years of research into just 3 minutes. Okay, get ready. All right. What if I told you something this small, a hearing aid, could fight dementia? Would you go to the audiologist and have your hearing tested? I want you all to imagine for a minute that your brain is like a gas tank, and it contains only a finite amount of fuel. As our hearing gets worse as we age, our brain burns more fuel. More fuel goes to listening, and more fuel goes to comprehending. But the more fuel, the more cognitive resources devoted just to listen, the less fuel there is for other stuff, like memory. Now, I want you to all imagine running like this, on empty, for 10 years. This is the average amount of time an adult with hearing loss waits before seeking treatment. Now, hearing loss is a little more common than some of you might think. How many of you guys are over the age of 50? About half of us in this room, when we reach the age of 50, about half of us will start to show signs of hearing loss. And by the time we're 80% of us will have a hearing loss. Next to hypertension and arthritis, it's actually the 3rd most common chronic health condition in older adults. Despite this statistic, only about 15% of us have ever had a hearing test. But what if I told you that hearing loss, when left untreated, is linked to lasting consequences? First, hearing loss is linked to cognitive decline. Risk of dementia increases 2 to 5-fold when hearing loss is present. Second, hearing loss is linked to structural and functional changes in the brain. Hearing parts of the brain literally atrophy or may be repurposed by other senses, like vision and touch. And third, hearing loss takes an emotional toll. People with hearing loss are 2 times more likely to be depressed. Just like hearing loss has been linked to cognitive decline, so too has depression and social isolation. So what do we do about it? That's where my research comes in. I'm an audiologist and a cognitive neuroscientist, and for my PhD thesis, I took a group of adults with normal hearing and a group of adults with early stage mild hearing loss. Some of these adults didn't even know that they had hearing loss when they came into the study. I looked at differences in baseline brain function, cognitive function, and social-emotional status between the 2 groups. I then fit the adults with hearing loss with a pair of state-of-the-art hearing aids. And guess what? Within 6 months of hearing aid use, the hearing loss group was already showing signs of more typical brain function. Important aspects of memory, like executive function and processing speed, had improved. And this is mild hearing loss. I leave you with this thought. Routine screens like mammograms our standard of care when we reach our 50s? Why not hearing screenings? What if one small change, going to the audiologist, having your hearing tested, trying a pair of hearing aids, might have a bigger, more long-lasting impact than you think? What do you guys think? 7 years of research, 3 minutes. Sounds a little crazy, it was. But this is just one example of one of the amazing experiences that was offered by CU Boulder, by the graduate school, that really puts PhD students outside of their element and provides us with mentorship, helps us with our professional development, helps us feel comfortable getting in front of people and talking about our research and making it matter to the audience. So let's go back to the beginning. When I started at CU Boulder back in 2010, I was an undergraduate. I had just transferred to CU. I was shy, I was reserved. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know what audiology was. I didn't even know what a PhD was or what it really took to get a PhD. I had no idea. And in my wildest dreams, I would have never imagined that years later, I would graduate from CU Boulder with my doctorate in audiology, a combined triple PhD in neuroscience, cognitive science, and speech and hearing science, and within a week of my dissertation, have 3 job offers in front of me. CU has been amazing. But when I really think about it, do any of you guys listen to that podcast? It's called How I Built This by Guy Raz. And at the end of the podcast, he asked them, how much of this would you attribute to hard work, and how much would you attribute this to luck? Well, I think he's missing one piece. I think he's missing the mentorship piece. Mentorship is huge. And when I think about why I'm standing here today in front of you guys, it's because of the mentors I have along the way. I am thankful to have many amazing mentors at CU Boulder, but one of them is my PhD advisor, Dr. Sharma. I remember meeting her in 2010. I was in my first year of classes at CU Boulder, and she was a guest lecturer in my class. She was coming in to talk about hearing loss and the brain. And I remember seeing her up there in front of the classroom, so enthusiastic and excited. She was jumping around, and whenever any student asked a question, a big smile would light up on her face. And before she responded and gave her answer, she would always ask the class, well, what do you think first? She has been the most influential person in getting me to where I am today, and it is because of 7 years of mentorship and insight and challenges that I'm standing where I am today. So I want you all to take a minute and think about the mentors that you have had in your life. Maybe some of them were mentors at CU Boulder. And just take a minute to say thank you for that. And after spending a year working in industry, I am super excited to announce that I've accepted a faculty position back at CU Boulder. I'm super excited to be teaching in the same department that trained me, working alongside students, helping them figure out what are you passionate about, and helping them find their herd. Thank you.
Awesome. Hannah just makes me smile. I don't know about anybody else. So when I hear her speak, she makes me smile. But I would now like to introduce our facilitator, Dean Scott Adler of the Graduate School at CU Boulder. Dean Adler has been at CU since 1996 when he joined the faculty as a political science professor, later rising to the chair of the political science department and founding director of the department's American Politics Research Lab. As Dean, Scott's vision for the graduate school focuses on broadening accessibility of graduate programs while also enabling students to gain leadership positions. Very fitting for him to be facilitating this Q&A with Hannah today. So just a reminder to use that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to pose questions. And Dean Adler will try to get through those as many questions as he can today. So welcome, Dean Adler, and welcome Hannah, and I'll let you both take it away.
Thank you, Brennan. I really appreciate this. And I want to thank all of our guests, viewers who tuned in. I know we had some technical difficulties when we tried to do this a few weeks ago, so I very much appreciate you sticking with us and coming back. I don't think you'll be disappointed, as you already saw from the video. Hannah is really a very special person. So I just want to say a little bit about Hannah, because she's very modest. She's many things. She's a neuroscientist, an audiologist, a mentor, a professor here at CU, and also, as you can already see, a very good public speaker. And so that mentorship and that being part of a professional early career scholar and teacher, and of course a scientist, is really a lot of what is part of Hannah, and what makes her so passionate about this field. Hannah, of course, as any great PhD from CU, has authored numerous scientific publications, book chapters, and has had a real impact on our understanding of hearing loss and brain development and cognitive function. And as you can see, she really does believe that better hearing begins with a better understanding of the brain, and how that feeds into her research and her teaching. Now, Hannah presented her 3-minute thesis, and as you saw, that's sort of the elevator pitch of academe. What she didn't say was that not only did she win our first place in our graduate school 3-minute thesis competition, as well as our People's Choice Award, so the top 2 awards that we give for that competition, she went on and won the Regional Western Association of Graduate Schools Grand Slam 3-minute thesis competition, and then also presented at the National 3-minute thesis competition. So she's as you can see, it was a very, very good presentation. I've known Hannah for a few years now, and I have to say she's just one of my favorite graduates of the graduate school. So we're really proud to have her part of the grad buff herd. So Hannah, let me just start with the first question. And I know you gave a little bit of the background of your academic experience, but tell me a little bit more about that sort of personal experience that drove you towards studying this specific connection between hearing loss and brain function.
Yeah, so what initially attracted me to the field of audiology is I actually had a friend whose mother had hearing loss. She had a progressive hearing loss over time and eventually got a cochlear implant as an adult. So she works at a children's hospital, and she counsels every family that has a baby born with hearing loss about different options. So that was going to shadow her in the hospital and see what she did every day is what kind of initially drew me into the field of audiology. But then over time, we started realizing that my grandmother had a hearing loss. She started developing hearing loss in her 50s, and her hearing got progressively worse over time. And I saw what she went through making the decision to get hearing aids, some of the daily struggles that she went through with hearing aid use. And she was really the primary motivator for me wanting to study older adults and how age-related hearing loss affects the brain.
Always got to remember unmute. Thank you, Hannah. We actually already have a question from the folks in our audience, and you'll have to help me with the pronunciation. Does tinnitus impact cognitive function? Is that how you pronounce it?
So it's called tinnitus. Most people in the US call it tinnitus. In the UK, they call it tinnitus. So either are acceptable terms, and audiologists will know what you're talking about. Tinnitus is basically a ringing or buzzing in the ears. And a lot of times tinnitus coincides with hearing loss. So a lot of people that have hearing loss also have tinnitus. It looks like this question asked about, does tinnitus affect cognitive function? So this is a really, really good question. And because there's a big overlap between hearing loss and tinnitus, it's sometimes hard to separate out. Does tinnitus cause cognitive decline? Does hearing loss cause cognitive decline? But it's an active area of research. And based on what I understand, it seems like tinnitus may affect certain aspects of cognitive function that may be different from aspects of cognitive function that are affected by hearing loss. So one of the big ones is attention. If we have this constant ringing or buzzing in our ears, we can be really hyper-focused on that ringing, and it may be hard to pay attention if someone is talking. So that's one of the main findings that we've seen so far is the impact of tinnitus on attention. But this is an active area of research, and I'm sure we'll learn much more in the years to come.
So Hannah, let me stick with the idea of hearing loss. Do you think that there are differences between age-related hearing loss and hearing loss for other reasons that might, and how they affect brain function? Is there something distinct about the two, or do they affect the brain in the same way?
Yeah, so for the longest time, we thought that only a very, very significant hearing loss, so like a severe to profound hearing loss, like deafness, would affect brain function. So we've known for a long time that in children that are born deaf, we see some pretty significant reorganization happen in the brain, especially if those kids don't get access to intervention with hearing aids or cochlear implants early. We've known that for a really long time. But it hasn't been until recent years that we've seen this link between hearing loss and changes in brain function in older adults, even with very, very mild hearing loss. So we've done continuation studies. We've looked at adults that have sudden hearing loss, and we've seen similar findings with brain reorganization. So we think that these changes are probably due to the hearing loss itself, more extensive changes if there's more significant hearing loss. But it probably happens across lots of different types of hearing loss.
Great, thank you. So another question on tinnitus. Mm-hmm. One of the attendees asks, I see TV ads promising treatments or improvements, but my doctor says, this is someone who seems to have this problem in at least one ear. My doctor says that there is no cure. So who's correct on this?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ads online, TV ads that'll kind of promote some kind of cure for tinnitus. But a lot of those are claims that aren't really backed up by solid scientific evidence. So currently there's no cure for tinnitus. We can't give you a pill and make your tinnitus go away. But there are treatment and management options. So hearing aids, if you have a hearing loss and tinnitus, hearing aids tend to be one of the first lines of defense, because if we can stimulate your auditory system and give you back that sound that you're missing, sometimes that's enough to suppress the tinnitus and help improve some of your tinnitus symptoms. So hearing aids are a big line of defense. And then other things can be things like environmental modifications, making sure you have some background noise, maybe the TV going in the background or a white noise machine when you go to sleep, to sort of distract your brain from the tinnitus that you're constantly hyper-focusing on. So it depends on the underlying cause of your tinnitus. But if you have hearing loss, usually hearing aids are one of the first lines of defense. Great question.
So sticking with this idea of how we deal with some of these hearing issues, how has the field of audiology changed lately? And also, how has the training for folks who are doing audiology like yourself also changed compared to, say, how it was a generation ago?
Yeah, so before my time, but in some of my professors' time when they were audiologists, um, back in the day, we thought maybe one hearing aid is just good enough. So if you had hearing loss in both ears, it was common 20, 30 years ago to just get a hearing aid in one ear. One of the things that has changed is we now know that we hear much better with two ears than we hear with one. So if you have hearing loss in both ears, getting amplification in both sides is usually going to help your performance a lot more than one hearing aid would. So that's something that's changed a lot. Another thing that has changed is back in the day, we didn't even treat mild hearing loss. So unless you're having really significant challenges hearing or understanding at work or in restaurants, we didn't even recommend amplification at all. But with what we're learning about these very early changes in the brain that can take place and risks for dementia and things like that, I think hearing aids are being recommended earlier and sooner. One other new piece of legislation that has just passed is an over-the-counter hearing aid act. So this passed a couple of years ago, and by the end of this year, the FDA should have basically it's a new class of hearing aid where you could actually buy a hearing aid over the counter. You could do a hearing test at an audiologist, maybe even online, and you could buy hearing aids online or over the counter. So the whole idea of this is to make hearing aids more affordable for people and also expand access to amplification. So there's some concerns about that. We don't want to miss people that might have a medical problem underlying their hearing loss. But in general, for your average older adult that just has age-related hearing loss, normal, typical, happens as we get older, some of these legislative changes may be kind of exciting coming down the pipeline too.
Wow, that part about the legislation might be a game changer for a lot of older Americans. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, next to a house and a car, hearing aids are the third most expensive purchase for older people.
Oh, that's fascinating. It didn't even occur to me that that would be in the realm of the most expensive things. I know they're very expensive, but wow.
Yeah.
So what do you, in terms of helping folks with their hearing loss, what are the actual improvements in cognitive improvements that you see when they've gone from a hearing impairment to an aid or help to that hearing impairment? What are the actual cognitive improvements that will happen?
Yeah, so we did as part of this research study, we did a whole battery of different cognitive tests, both at baseline, right after, acutely after hearing aid fitting, and then at a 6-month follow-up. And so what we found is on these cognitive tests, adults that were wearing hearing aids were showing improvements in different aspects of their cognitive function. So their processing speed, how quickly they could process information was faster. Their executive function, which involves a lot of planning and decision-making, that was also much improved. And aside from those cognitive changes, we also saw changes in brain plasticity happening in the brain. So before hearing aid fitting, in this group of adults with hearing loss, what we saw is the brain kind of got repurposed. It's sort of like a use it or lose it. If the hearing part of the brain's not being stimulated normally, it may start to respond to other things like vision or touch. And we saw reversal in that after hearing aid fitting. So pretty amazing and pretty drastic changes that we saw. All of the adults in our study had mild hearing loss. So we were kind of shocked when we saw that.
Yeah, so just as a little background, part of how Hannah and I got to know each other is after I had seen her give the talk, we started talking about my mother who has hearing loss. And we noticed very early on that was associated with reduced attention span and engagement And when we were able to get her what turned out to be better hearing aids and ones that she wore more often, all of a sudden the attention span went back up. So yeah, we were seeing exactly the kinds of things that Hannah was talking about.
That's awesome.
So a question about masks. How have you seen mask wearing during COVID impact those with hearing loss? That is their inability to read lips, and anything else you'd recommend that would help during a period where all of us have masks on our mouths.
Yeah, this is a big one. There's been so much online posting from people with hearing loss that are really struggling when they go into a grocery store and they're in the checkout line and they're wearing a mask, and the person behind the checkout line is also wearing a mask. It makes communication much more difficult. There's also been some studies looking at hospitals. When you go into the doctor for an appointment, the doctor's wearing a mask and the patient's wearing a mask and has hearing loss. That can make communication between patient and provider more challenging. So things I would recommend is making sure that if you have hearing loss and you're not wearing hearing aids are going to help you. So even though you're losing those visual cues and those spatial cues, wear your hearing aids when you go to the grocery store, wear your hearing aids when you go to the doctor's office. And I think also advocating for yourself. I think a lot of people with hearing loss are sometimes afraid to speak up if they've missed something. But if you're at your doctor's office and you didn't understand what they said, make sure, ask them to repeat. It's better for you to get the information than to not get the information. There are some clear masks out there, and there's people producing masks that have clear windows. Some challenges with that. Most of those windows are made of plastic, and they actually reduce the ability for sound to transmit through those windows. So it can make it worse, but can help people who lip read. So that's an option. And you also want to think about the protective aspect of the mask. Those standard medical disposable masks tend to be much more protective than, let's say, a homemade cloth mask or a mask that has that clear plastic window on them. So pros and cons of these things, but this is definitely an issue that a lot of people with hearing loss have been talking about.
A question from our attendees, an issue we all face, earwax. But it's probably not a trivial issue for audiologists. How does that impact hearing loss or even hearing aids? We experienced that issue with my mother. And any better way to clean our ears?
Good question. So having earwax in your ears, your earwax is actually a self-cleaning mechanism. It keeps debris out of your ear, helps self-clean the ear. So it's actually good to have some earwax in your ear. For most people, earwax isn't a problem. It doesn't affect hearing in any way. But sometimes if there's a buildup of wax, it can get impacted. And that can cause a temporary hearing loss. And that can just be removed at your regular old doctor's office. One of the things that we do know is that for people that have hearing loss that wear hearing aids, they have something artificial in their ear. You know, it's a piece of equipment that's not part of your body. And so a lot of people that wear hearing aids have more of a buildup of earwax, which just means they have to get their ears cleaned out more regularly. So I've had patients where we just set up a cleaning schedule. They're coming in every 6 months. When we check their hearing aids, we also clean out their earwax. So it's just part of life. There are some over-the-counter treatments. You can buy something called Debrox, which is it's basically mineral oil. You put a couple drops in your ear at night. You can get this at CVS or local pharmacy. It just loosens up the earwax and it'll start having it move outside of your ear. Works for some people, doesn't work for everyone. But I would not recommend cleaning your ears at home. Q-tips actually do more harm than good. You don't want to get those little white wisps on the Q-tip stuck in your ears. That can cause a problem. So nothing bigger than your finger should go in your ear canal. That's my tip for the day.
Bigger or smaller than your finger?
Oh, sorry, smaller.
I don't think you could fit much bigger
No,
than.
can't fit, and that's a good sign. You can't fit your finger in your ear, and nothing smaller than that should go in your ear canal.
One of our attendees asked about stem cell treatments for hearing issues. Anything thoughts you have on either stem cell or other experimental treatments for dealing with hearing loss?
Yeah, so this is another really hot area of research. I'm actually teaching a class in pharmacology this semester to graduate students where they're learning about all this new research, and including stem cell therapy. So we've made a lot of great strides in identifying different genes that contribute to hearing loss. In animal models, they've had some success looking at stem cell therapy as a treatment for hearing loss, but we're just not there yet. And I think that we're at least 10 years, if not more, off to finding a cure or a treatment for hearing loss. There are hundreds of genes that can cause hearing loss. So most of the research is targeting the most common genes that cause hearing loss, but everybody may have different genetic factors that contribute to their hearing loss. Also, our inner ear, where most of the hearing loss is totally encased in bone. So even if we developed a therapy, how do we actually get that therapy into the ear? That is a big challenge. So I think that a lot of progress has been made, a lot of progress will continue to be made, but I think we're still a long ways off from having a cure.
So a couple questions on hearing aids again, but let me start with one. Is our hearing aid performance, is this really limited to just simply amplification of sound, or are there other corrections that hearing aids do, like, I guess, filtering out ambient noise or other things that may inhibit hearing?
Great question. So a lot of you probably remember like your parents or grandparents when they wore hearing aids, and you'd hear the hearing aids whistling all the time in their ears. So the original hearing aids were all analog, and they were basically just like an amplifier, just turning up the sound. But hearing aids today are digital hearing aids. So in addition to amplification, you're also getting a lot of extra features like noise reduction, speech enhancement, to really help optimize hearing and understanding of speech. So hearing aids have become really sophisticated these days. So whether you're low tech or high tech, there are different options for you. If you're the kind of person that wants to put your hearing aids in and not think about them the rest of the day, and they do everything automatically for you, there is a hearing aid option out there for that. If you're the kind of person who likes to have an app on your phone and make adjustment or tweaks in the different environments that you're in, hearing aids can do that today too. So they've become pretty sophisticated, and they're more than just an amplifier.
And so let me follow up with that. Do they treat different kinds of sounds that you want to be able to hear differently, like music versus voice, versus, say, sounds in a crowd or something like that?
Yes, and it used to be that you'd have to change into a special program when you wanted to listen to music, or when you got into a car and there's road noise. But hearing aids have made great strides, and they've become more and more automatic. So a lot of hearing aids now, they actually detect what environment you're in, what kind of sounds are in your environment, and they'll automatically change programs for you, so you don't have to do it.
So you talked a little bit about the cognitive changes that occur because of hearing loss, but do hearing aids themselves affect the brain or the wiring in the brain differently?
Yeah, so the fact that we saw a reversal in some of these brain changes. So before hearing aid fitting, we were seeing vision light up in hearing parts of the brain. And after treatment with hearing aids, we no longer saw that. Vision was lighting up where it should be in the back of our head in the visual part of our brain. So we were seeing some reversal in some of those brain changes. So we think that hearing aids can rewire the brain. What we don't know is how soon is intervention optimal. So the adults in our study had very, very mild hearing loss. Most probably only had their hearing loss maybe 3, 5, maybe 7 years at most. But what if somebody has a hearing loss that goes untreated for 20 years? Will we be able to see rewiring or reversal in some of these changes in the brain? We just don't have answers to that right now.
So one of the questions was very much related to the answer you just gave, and I'm just going to read it because it's a little complicated. The field of vision therapy, what this person's referring to is behavioral ophthalmology, helps with eye-brain connection. It can have an amazing impact for stroke victims and learning disabled folks. Is there a similar hearing therapy that addresses the ear-brain connection, like white noise generators, or are hearing aids really the only thing?
Yeah, so there's a whole field that's part of audiology called oral rehabilitation, which is basically like physical therapy for your ears, therapy programs to help you optimize your speech understanding. But usually it's coupled with intervention. So if you get a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, you can work with an oral rehabilitation therapist who's going to help you optimize your hearing abilities with your hearing aid or with your cochlear implant. So it's kind of like getting a new knee. You have the new technology in your knee, but then you're doing a bunch of rehab and therapy exercises to get that knee working the best that it can. Same idea there. Unfortunately, that's not covered by insurance for most adults. It is covered for children. But that's something that I hope changes in the future as we learn more about the impact of hearing loss on the brain and the benefits of treatment, that this will be something that will be included in insurance policies as well.
Any other recommendations on choosing the right hearing aid? I know you've talked about a few things, but things that we might want to think about if we're going to go and get a new hearing aid or get a hearing aid for the first time.
Yeah, so if you go to an audiologist, I really recommend scheduling an appointment with an audiologist to learn about all your options. Your audiologist is going to ask you a lot of questions about your preferences, your needs, what kind of environments you're in every single day, how much background noise you're in every day. And based on your answers, they're going to make some recommendations for you. So it really depends on your lifestyle. If you're really active and you're in lots of different kinds of noisy environments on a day-to-day basis, your needs might look really different from somebody who is at home, maybe hanging out with their spouse, going for walks where it's quiet. The hearing aid that you might benefit from most may look very different. So I'd recommend talking to a professional. There's no cost for a hearing aid consultation. Talk to a professional and get all of the information you can before you make that decision.
A lot of us today are listening to music or other podcasts in ear headphones or earbuds. And is there a danger that listening to music too loud could lead to hearing loss?
Yes, so noise exposure is one of the leading causes of hearing loss. And even with age-related hearing loss, we can't really tease apart what is noise exposure that you've had throughout your life versus what is genetic versus what is just getting older. So definitely noise-induced hearing loss is a real thing. We're seeing a rise of noise-induced hearing loss actually in teens and young adults wearing those AirPods. Listening to their music really, really loud. And this is something that I think we just need to bring up to the forefront and talk about as a public health issue.
Yeah, I have to admit that I went to way too many concerts when I was young. And there were times that I came home and boy, I couldn't hear very well for the next day or two.
Yep.
probably was not a good idea, but
We live and we learn. I think we've
yes.
learned a lot of things over the last 20 years about noise-induced hearing loss.
So you mentioned that noise-induced hearing loss, and then of course there's age-related hearing loss. Other things that cause hearing loss, genetic things, other things we need to think about that it might affect hearing loss, other health issues?
Yeah, genetic issues are a big factor contributing to hearing loss. If you have a family history of hearing loss, your mother, your father, other members of your family have had hearing loss, you may be more predisposed to hearing loss. Another big one is kidney function. So my grandmother actually had polycystic kidneys, kidney disease, and our kidneys and our ears are very closely aligned. Our ears and our kidneys actually develop at the same time during embryological development. And so if you have diabetes or any other types of kidney dysfunction, that's an additional risk factor for hearing loss as well.
That's good to know. What kinds of things would you recommend to us just in our daily lives to stave off hearing loss, even age-related hearing loss? Are there things that we can do to just keep our ears healthy?
So that's a great question. I know there's been like a lot of talk about, is there like a diet for hearing loss? You know, foods that we should eat, antioxidants to make sure that we can preserve our hearing. At this point, we don't really know yet. But I think all of the other things, living as healthy of a lifestyle as you can, getting exercise, protecting your ears. So if you're going to go to a loud concert or you blow dry your hair every day, you don't really realize how loud your hair dryer is. Put in a pair of disposable earplugs. If you're an avid concert goer, you don't have to stop going to concerts, but might be a good idea to get some custom earplugs with a nice like 10 or 20 dB filter that'll kind of bring the noise levels down a little bit to safer levels. So I would say the biggest thing you could probably do is protect those ears that you have, because once those hair cells in the ear die, they can't regrow themselves, at least until we have these stem cell therapies coming down the pipeline.
I have to admit, I started wearing these as I go to concerts.
Nice.
Normal earplugs, not custom fit ones, just to cut down on the sound. It was getting a little much as I was getting older.
I love it. Yeah, my husband is taking a woodworking class right now for fun. And I actually went into his class and I educated them all about noise-induced hearing loss and handed out earplugs to everyone. And they're wearing earplugs now too. So same thing, working around loud equipment or machinery. If you like working in your wood shop, just make sure that you put your earplugs in.
So another question from one of our attendees was about, we sometimes see folks with hearing aids that are attached to the skull. And what's going on there? What's the difference?
Yeah, so that's called a bone conduction hearing aid. And that's for somebody that has a disorder that may be affecting their outer ear or their middle ear. So there's children, for example, that are born without an ear canal. So sound has a hard time getting into the inner ear so it can make its way up to the brain. So for these children, what we'll do is we'll put a tiny little, surgically put a tiny little abutment or metal piece, and we'll attach a processor, and it vibrates the inner ear directly and sends that information to the brain. So if you see those, it's usually somebody that has something going on with their outer ear or their middle ear. Their three little bones, the malleus, incus, and stapes, or hammer, anvil, and stirrup. Maybe those bones became dislodged through like an accident or something like that.
Great, thank you, Hannah. So tell us, where is your work going to go from here? What do you have planned ahead in terms of your research and in terms of your work in audiology?
Yeah, so one of the surprising things that we found from this study was actually that the group of adults with mild hearing loss reported higher depressive symptoms compared to the adults without hearing loss. And we saw some small improvements in depression after hearing aid fitting. But what I'm really interested in is looking beyond cognitive function and looking at things like depression and social isolation and how it relates to hearing loss and how these factors may affect the brain. So one of the things that we don't know is we know hearing loss and dementia are linked, but we don't know why. So are these cognitive changes taking place directly because of the hearing loss? Or is it due to social isolation or depression? I think in the next coming years, what I really want to work out is trying to tease all of these things apart and really figure out what's causing what, if we can.
Yeah, I have to say, bringing it back to the personal, we noticed that there seemed to be hearing related agitation with my mother. She would be very short-tempered, and either it was directly connected to her hearing, she just simply didn't hear what was happening, or indirectly. And then of course she was getting we agitated in instances where it just didn't seem appropriate, and very much think that that was related to her hearing.
Yeah, so I think these things, I mean, right now, audiologists don't necessarily routinely screen for cognitive function or depression. And it's something that's another kind of clinical application piece, is looking at whether or not audiologists should be screening for cognitive function and depression. A lot of people that have early onset Alzheimer's or have depression, it goes completely undiagnosed. So if we can catch it early and help as much as we can as audiologists, I think that could make a big difference. So that's kind of where I'm hoping to go in the future.
That's great, sort of tying in mental health and the emotional aspects of it to your research. Yeah, that's really fascinating. So what do you recommend for someone who might be interested in going into this field? What should they think about? A younger person, say a student who's just getting introduced to this, what would you recommend to them to start with?
I think observing an audiologist. So I always tell my undergraduate students, and in the SLHS department here at CU, students actually take a class where they're shadowing speech pathologists and audiologists to figure out what areas are they interested in. But I think that's one of the best ways to learn, is to shadow someone, see what they do every day, and see if it piques your interest and if it's something that you're passionate about. So I think that's one of the best ways to learn, is just to learn from someone else, to be mentored by someone else.
And I know there are some new things going on in the speech language and hearing sciences department. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of what's happening in your field.
Yeah, so there's a lot happening in SLHS, but one of the cool things that we have that's unique to the speech language hearing science department is we actually have a clinic on campus where our speech pathology students will see patients that have speech and language disorders. We also do oral rehabilitation, that ear therapy like I was talking about. We do that in our clinic downstairs. We also have a preschool where we pair kids that are typically developing with kids that have additional disabilities. So we're doing a lot of clinical outreach kind of programs at CU, which is a lot of fun, in addition to all the active areas of research that are going on as well.
Yeah, it's a very, this is a department that's really changing a lot right now, and in great ways in connecting the academic work, both the teaching, but also the scholarship with the community. And it's not, we need to be doing more of this, sort of translating what we're doing as researchers here in the university toward how it helps society and how it helps our local community as well. And I think SLHS is really a prime example of where that we can have that interface. Yeah, so it's great. So the 3M competition, it prepared you, you think, for where you were headed next? Did it change the way you were thinking about your degree? Did it change what you wanted to do in any way? I'm curious, that's how I got introduced to you, was through this competition, but how it affected you as someone finishing her degree at that point.
Yeah, so I would recommend the 3-minute thesis competition to every graduate student. It's a good way to get out of your comfort zone and also get out of your department. So one thing that kind of makes me sad is that a lot of people's dissertations or master's theses, they end up in the library. They're online and freely available, but not a lot of people read them. They're long. And I think the 3-minute thesis competition gives you a chance to do community outreach, to talk about the impact of your research on real people and on the real world, and to do it in a quick and accessible way. Most of us don't have time to read 300-page theses or dissertations. And so being able to attend a 3-minute thesis and learn something interesting that you'd never thought about before, or think about hearing loss in a different way, that's kind of the beauty of it. And I think for a lot of graduate students, it can be really nerve-wracking to get in front of a big audience of people and talk about your work. And I think that the 3-minute thesis equips you with some good public speaking skills that I think are just life skills. They're going to serve you well as you go off into the world. We talk to people and we interact with people every day. So the more practice you have with it, the better that you get.
Yeah, I was really amazed when I listened to the 3-minute theses. I first off, all the projects were just fascinating. But as you pointed out, there was no way I was going to read the entire dissertation, and to get it distilled down to 3 minutes, just the highlights, and then to see really what kind of fascinating work from aerospace engineering to comparative literature. I mean, it was really all of the work that was being done was really just amazing. And to have the graduate students who, of course, know their research inside and out, to be able to then translate it for folks who have no familiarity with even the field itself was really quite a gift that I think we were getting when we were seeing these presentations one after another. So we did have it public 3-minute thesis presentations. We had to go remote this year because of course, the pandemic, but I think we'll try and make sure that other folks can see the presentations. We're going to have them all in a sort of Zoom format. So I think we have time for one other question. Again, a little more ear health. Should we be wearing earplugs when we're swimming in the pool, when you're doing laps, I suppose, to protect the ear, or what do you think?
Yeah, so most people don't wear earplugs when swimming. But if you have a history of outer or middle ear disorders, so maybe recurrent ear infections, if you have a hole in your eardrum due to recurrent ear infections, you're definitely going to want to protect your ear and wear swim plugs when you go swimming. But for most of us, unless we don't like having water in our ears, there's not necessarily a reason that we have to wear swim plugs.
Great. Well, thank you, Hannah. I think we're going to turn it back to Brendan at this point to kind of bring this all home. Brendan?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Hannah Glick. Thank you, Dean Adler. And that was truly fascinating. And personally, I am so happy that this field has someone like Hannah that's doing this important research and hopefully making new discoveries that are gonna, I'm sure, impact future generations. It's just so important, and just so happy to have you here with us today. So for any participants wanting more information or want to follow up with our speakers, we have some resources on the screen right now, Dean Adler and Hannah Glick's email. We hope you continue the conversation and connect with our faculty members on their research. And you continue to connect with your friends about what you heard today and spread the news about the incredible faculty members that we have at CU Boulder. And we hope you continue to engage with CU during these challenging times. The Alumni Association and the university are working to bring content like this Q&A to connect with our alumni and friends, and to hopefully keep you tuned in and engaged. So And then with that, we hope you have a really nice Thursday afternoon and a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving holiday. Hang in there. And of course, go Buffs. Thanks all.